Lights, camera, action.
Okay, lights, camera, action. Let's get the, maybe I should get prepared first. My agenda here. Okay, let's do the call to order. That's the call to order and a pledge of allegiance. Notification. Here to steer.
To the flag of America, the republic for which it stands,
Nation. God. With liberty. Right.
Yes, I will scoot down a bit. Okay, Steve.
Yeah,
I'm way down here.
come on down. Yeah, I don't know if Wendy, did we get a call from Wendy? Notification? Maybe she's just running late.
Traffic is pretty bad.
Down.
I don't recall. I feel like I got a call from somebody, but
Mary Rose sent an email.
that must be
We know she's not gonna be here. She's up. Yeah, she's went down to St. Croix, I think, for her birthday today.
Sweet.
her.
So she's gonna be living it up there.
We're sitting there going, man, I could be sitting in a council chamber.
In a government building. Okay, so that's open space landscaping. All right, so let's get this show on the road. It'll be a action-packed agenda as always. Let's start with the roll call. Start with to the left there with you. In a second.
Rose Larkin, present.
Jennifer Rusk, present.
Fossum, present. Johnson, present.
Robert Howell, present.
Each council liaison present?
Statute staff. Myers Beach.
Okay, excellent. First on the agenda here is approve the agenda. Any motions to approve the agenda?
The minutes.
We're on the agenda first.
I mean, the agenda, I'm sorry. Minutes when we get to it.
Got a second?
Click on that.
Okay. Any discussion? Position? Motion carries unanimously. Now we can approve the previous meeting minutes. A motion.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
At the right time.
I'll second that. Any corrections? Objections? Motion carries unanimously. Boom. We're on to 6 already. Public comment? No?
This is gonna
Maybe
drag
Eva?
on.
No? Okay. Carry on there. Now we're on to 7. Look at that. Current items. First off, beach renourishment, starring Ed Schutz.
All right, so this is the latest and greatest from the engineer. As you can see up there, it has draft on it. Just gonna take it sitting down from right here, if that's all right with everyone.
I'd like you
Feel
to
free
stand.
to interrupt me if you have any questions during. I will do my best to answer, but I will remind everyone that I am not an engineer. There's the project location. This is the beach renourishment. Helpful to get your bearings with the R monuments. How the state marks the locations for references. Start up at 174 or 125, 174, and it wraps around. The previous project went down to 182, which is around Canal Street. This project is proposing to place sand all the way down. Yep, this project is proposing to place sand all the way down to approximately Narc. I have the open beach area, which called Holiday Inn Beach. We have a low-lying area. I have the CWA down here. Our 204, I don't know if anyone's been around there lately. It is loaded again at last Halloween storm front. So again, it's about 30 feet away from the building. We're working with FDEP to see if there's any solutions And I think they spent around $14,000 in sand after Elsa. Lion's share of that's eroded away. There.
It wasn't planted or anything, correct? That was just,
No, actually, they did spend a lot of money on plantings, but fairly close to the wave action, so that's not a panacea. Actually, just a new plantings like that. The previous project performed well. In 2011, it was a Lee County sponsored project. April to December of 2011, placing approximately 403,000 cubic yards and constructing a terminal groin to try and hold sand island.
A question about that at that end.
Sir,
Why don't they extend that jetty out further? They just dredged it, what, last year at the end of Bowditch? And the current and everything just keeps, it's coming right back where it was. I've just always been curious, why don't they extend the jetty there to capture some of that?
Groin? Out of the rocks?
Yeah, yeah,
The term is a groin.
right, okay.
I remember, I think one of the reasons I put that in years ago, my understanding was not to accumulate sand, but to keep sand from filling in the channel.
on the island, on the channel.
It does a wonderful job.
Well, there's a lot of sand on the channel side of that groin now. Put it in, there was nothing there.
Okay. But I'm just thinking, so the way that it looks like to me, so you got the end of the island, and the sand's coming around and filling in out into the channel. I know we're trying to get off, I don't mean to get off topic too much, I'm just curious if it's a similar situation with, but if they just extended that out into a jetty, so it's a long, big rock, wouldn't it capture some of that to keep it from going into the channel?
There may have been some permitting limitations. Again, I'm
Okay.
not a coastal engineer, so I don't have the answer, but
And also I'll just kind of comment too, because actually these groins are all up and down the island.
Yeah.
When we have a big storm event, like after Tropical Storm Debbie, you saw them popping up like Coconut, Hercules, that area. They're all over the place, but just never, they're covered with sand. The other thing that happens a lot is that we have sand migration patterns that are all over the map. Down generally south, but sometimes they're going other ways. When you put one of those groins out, you tend to accumulate sand on one side and scour it on the other. So depending on what's going on, depends on what kind of effect it has.
Okay.
And it's pretty variable.
I'm just curious of that, because we're trying to put, because it looks the way that it flows, it would add sand to the north end of the island on the south side of where we want sand, essentially, and it would keep it from going into the channel.
I can ask the
just-
engineer and get back to you.
Neither am I. Yeah. So, yeah. Thank you.
hey, not to interrupt you, I was just notified that we're not on YouTube yet. So,
With that.
You read lips?
gotcha.
So,
repeat?
just to familiarize everyone with what's going on with the red lines, the blue lines. Earlier, we have the red line is the erosion control line, so that is the mean high water line, 6 months or sooner. The previous project, so back in sometime within 6 months of April 2011, they surveyed the mean high water line. That became the erosion control line for the project.
Now, the project did not put sand in that the length of that.
Correct. Have the mean high water line for 2021, which is the blue line. So the borough area is where we're going to be taking sand from. Permitted back in 2011, we're going to be reusing that again. It has approximately 1 million cubic yards still left in it, so plenty to the beach for at least the initial fill. Pink lines are pipeline corridors, which have recently been surveyed for any cultural resources that either the agency or the engineers.
And boats, sunken,
Apparently there's a
Aliens.
barge somewhere right around here outside the borough area.
Made.
There's areas within there where they get some kind of metallurgy. Don't know what it is, they just stay away from it. don't know, could be a sunken boat, could be a
Probably a UFO.
natural.
Be a torpedo, unexploded torpedo.
You can see the 2021 mean high water is an elevation. Get how it jets out, and that's from benefiting from that U.S. Army Corps maintenance dredging project, beneficial use, placing about 124,000 cubic yards the near shore. That's why that line is jutting out right there.
And hey, Shannon, based on that, sorry, I was a little bit distracted. So the renourishment's only gonna go down to Lanark, are you saying?
So
Yeah, right there. That one.
the renourishment, what we've asked FDP, so all of this shoreline here till I believe it's around R200 is designated as critically eroded, more or less. And then I think the designation picks up again at R203, designated critically eroded to around R208, I believe. Looking at the monitoring data, this area in between there is slightly erosional over a long-term period. We are asking FDEP to designate that as critically eroded as well. What that does is qualifies us for state funding. Two major criteria for state funding is A, is it critically eroded, and B, public access. So if it's not critically eroded, up right there, if it is critically eroded, then the amount of state funding depends on the amount of public access. Full pages of statute to answer your question. The current project extends from Bowditch all the way down to WA. Now, because this area doesn't necessarily need a bunch of sand along the mean high water line, we're proposing to just place sand, either place sand in the low-lying area or maybe push sand to create a positive gradient. So
Now, I know you said about pushing sand down on the southern end, but the Holiday Inn area, sand, you're gonna create like a little bay, aren't you?
we're, from talking to the engineer, we're permitting both options, keep our options open. So I'll leave it to the, which is best in how. These drawings, these cross sections are showing the beach. The red line is how it currently looks. Profile. The design beach, so he's more or less putting about 75 feet of beach as the design, and that's he's run it through a modeling study to account for, I believe, a 25-year design storm event. How much beach do we need for a storm? About a storm reduction analysis, that effect. Shoreline change analysis. So they put it through their software, model it, and they come out with a certain amount of beach that they feel is adequate to benefit a storm. And then they add an additional, here I believe it's about 100 or so feet. That is to account for 10 years of erosion. They know they've been monitoring the beach. So they put the erosion rate and they account for how much erosion is going to happen over 10 years. We want this beach to be at the design 10 years from now. Therefore, we need to account for that 10 years of erosion on the front end. We put the additional sand out there so that in 10 years from now, we haven't done a renourishment yet, but we get a big storm, we still have that storm reduction benefit. So he plotted out, different cross-sections for the north, typical cross-sections for the north, typical cross-sections for the central. Here is that low-lying area, and you'll see this 1 to 200, that is the slope. There's an FDP agreed upon, positive slope, beneficial for sea turtles. It's that low-lying area getting there.
I'd like to hear what you guys think about this Holiday Inn patch. And they also, Chad mentioned at the south end of the island, they're looking at taking and moving it from or inland, because right now there's ponds close to the condos, and there's high sand really rapidly down.
Talking about Holiday Inn Beach?
The the Holiday Inn Beach, filling that to give a positive slope. There would be requirements for, I assume, even if it isn't out into the Gulf, Chad, there's still requirements for dune lines?
Yeah, I believe anything that TDC is going to be putting money in, Lee County Master Plan requires vegetative plantings. We following the managed beach zone document that we used last time, where I believe it's 75% of the width of the property must be vegetated, and approximately, I believe it's 15 feet deep. All right.
Would that also be in the south part if you were used to?
If we can we save the south end for a different conversation, because it's not within this project, and the funding be different. I would assume if public funds were going into it, yes.
When you say make a bay there, potentially of having like a pond, right? Is that what you're talking about? How they could move the sand enough so there'd be like a pond there?
Well, I don't know if you remember, I was
Yeah.
down there to.
And it floods pretty regularly there.
Yes, right now it's
Right.
flooded. So that,
Are they
the
wanting
idea,
to-
one proposal he just said, and First America, is actually you just take the sand that's on and you move it in so that the shoreline would actually go in there.
So,
Shallow.
In that case, though, we wouldn't be, it'd only be pushing sand landward of the mean high if there's enough sand in the system to create that. You wouldn't be changing the contour of the shoreline.
it already floods there pretty regularly. Would it make it so it's more or less likely to flood there?
Yes, it'd be creating a positive gradient. If you can see right here, so the red line is the current state where you have this dip and it comes back up. You can see the mean high water line is right here. So this sand, the question is two different options. Option one, we're dredging in from the borough area, pump sand and fill in this low-lying area right here to create a 1 to 200 slope. That second option, and it's dependent on whether or not there's enough sand in the system, push it, create the slope without having to pump any sand in there. I believe it's $20 a cubic yard for pumping versus somewhere between $3 and $7 to push it.
Is that area considered critically eroded?
That's what we are asking FDP to reclassify it as critically eroded, so we can qualify for funding.
Isn't that the area where the condo people would like to have a walkover?
An area.
Oh, okay.
This is all, as you can see, it's this area right here.
Okay.
It's underwater right now. Last washover, so
Where's the area where the people?
it's still further down south.
When you go from there, you get to the critical wildlife area, which is eroding pretty rapidly. Then you get to a point where it's accreting rapidly. Right between those points is where that.
Okay.
Tell you, I have some real reservations about this. And one of the reasons is that because, it's been done some time ago. Well, I've been told, the other issue I have, I appreciate the addition of the dune plants, and that would solve some problems that we have. It would define the turtle nesting habitat within those dunes, and so the conflict we'd have with equipment and some other things, the landward side of there would kind of be alleviated. The problem I have is that if you put a line of dune plants in there, even without them, but certainly with them, probably, and you're raking behind it, it's going to take one wind event. It's going to build up sand where those dune plants are and create a dam back where you were really quickly. With the dune plants, I just see that becoming a dam. Without, to a degree.
I think the preference, what I'm hearing from owners is the preference is going to be to plant the plants fairly close to their condos. I don't think they're going to put it in the middle. Would alleviate.
Even, but even a berm also builds up on the beach side.
They have a rake in that area?
They do rake, and then to address the berm concern and damming, et cetera, we are including a maintenance rating throughout the life of the project to maintain that design slope.
If the dune plants are put up closer to the buildings, that means the whole beach would be to those dune plants.
Has this area ever been successfully made to drain properly, like with other projects?
There was a project in Marco Island that had Marco Island's a fairly wide beach and had similar ponding issues that residents didn't like, and years, Collier County was able to permit moving beach anywhere from, I believe, 200 feet that sand, putting it up on the beach to create that positive slope. So, but it's from here all the way down to the tail end, basically to the bridge. That same effect, whether it's vegetated or unvegetated, you have a high berm and lying area and or lagoon. Nature of the dynamics for Southwest Florida Beach.
Now, yeah, because I think if you look at what's going on in other places along the beach, they didn't rake it, they left it natural, there might even be a lagoon. There's
a lagoon there right now. Well, point now I forgot what it was. I think that the kind of erosion, I understand, when I was down there, it was, it hasn't rained in a few days, but there's, all the guests are having to, all the people from the condo stuff are wading through water, quite a ways to get to the beach.
Some high tides.
But I would think that, I consider like quickly eroded where it's taking away like valuable habitat or risking structures, which this doesn't seem to be doing. Although I know Leonardo Arms some time ago, when there was a lagoon there, they had to put up sandbags because the current from lagoon go too far, it may threaten some. My understanding was, and I just heard this from somebody who's been around a while, they did this probably 20 years ago, longer. I guess they got 20 years out of it, maybe.
Questions?
Comment, it sounds like whole renourishment from end to end is only a 20-25 year plan, and it's going to need more sand in another 20-25 years. So
it's a 10-year plan, and the life of the permit's 15 years. We may be able to extend that another 15 years. I'm not sure. I believe that's what I heard from the FDF. It's definitely a 15-year permit. Absolutely.
yeah. So I mean, all the sand renourishment is not a permanent fix.
Sand is considered sacrificial, which Leonardo Arms is painfully aware of.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not going to do a permanent structure, you have to put up with doing this every 20 years.
I do think, another thing that comes up too, in this area is, an area where I think it's applicable is that it's a whole lot of area with no vegetation at all. And when you rake that area, the surface blows away and down low it gets really hard. That's what I've heard from like the turtle nesting, was that, underneath the rake sand, it's hard and difficult for the turtles to nest in. So I would, and I don't know if we have the ability to, we're going to support this aspect is to require more vegetation than, and I would also think down near that, building 1 of Leonardo Arms, they do have vegetation, and it's a prescribed vegetation, but that's like, after that, you're right on the building. And the sand is right up against it, and at the last storm, there's quite a bit of erosion down there now. So, and it wasn't really even a storm in a lot of ways, just wind.
Oh, right, also it's just a tropical storm.
What would it take to turn that whole area just into like a bunch of dunes?
Oh, yeah, you'd have to get the cooperation of the property owners.
Yeah, but I mean, are they
You put the
utilizing
sand.
it for anything?
Sorry?
Are they utilizing it for any like recreational stuff or other than just?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big recreational tourist beach, and those property owners like it nice and wide open.
Okay.
So from my perspective, I see it as a tourist beach. Manage it as a tourist beach. Let's make it as enjoyable as possible. I understand the vegetation there. There has been a lot of pushback in the past, from what I understand, to putting any vegetation there. So from my perspective, for beach management, getting, and if it's minimal according to the beach management zone, that amount of vegetation would be a win for me. Not going to be the high dunes that we have right here. That's if we the alternative of trying to say we're not going to do this unless you put 100 feet of dunes or 50 feet of dunes, we're not going to pump any sand there. They're probably going to say, okay, well, thanks and have a great day.
I guess that's kind of my point. What is their ideal outcome? Like, what do they want it to look like? Because right now they can't utilize it because there's a lagoon there.
I can't speak for them. What I'm hoping is that they'll be amenable to the managed beach zone description of 75% of the width of their property wide.
I'm just thinking, kind of proportionality. So we do 75% from one axis, and then we do a fixed number of feet on the other. And if you have 100 feet of beach, 15 feet is one thing. If you have 500 feet of beach, smaller. If you have a structure like Leonardo Arms, 15 feet they have now is really not providing adequate protection. They stick out further than anybody else. The kind of question is that Leonardo Arms has that pier. And I'm not sure if that would be an obstruction when they're doing the renourishment, because when they did it 12 years ago, pump all the sand out, and then they get trucks and they keep moving it around and pulling it and compressing it. And having a structure out there seems like it'd be.
We're able to do it, the beneficial use nourishment. So
they'd be able to keep that, even though it'd be 100 feet of sand.
well, it'll have 100 feet of sand in front of it. I don't think it'll be 100 feet of sand on top of it.
No. Well, not, now anyway. Being buried, it seems like even though the shoreline's moving closer to it, the sand is getting deeper where it is.
They are having to maintain it, as
underground.
you can see out there today. So moving on to this R204, which is at Leonardo Arms. Again, you have the design beach. I believe they added a bit more design, if I recall correctly, maybe 75 feet to 125 feet. Because of the dynamics of the way the island's shaped, it is much more erosional in that area. I mean, this is the place of the island that definitely needs this closest spot where the Gulf is closest to the structure at R204.
There's another aspect of it too, because right now, critical wildlife area, if it's state land, then you get state funding. There's a court case where some property owners are trying to claim theirs, not the state's. So if that passes, if they win, then that means that there's funding land, because there's not a lot of public access down there either.
Yeah, I mean, so that area is right here. This is Texas Hold'em Squeeze Me In. They were proposing a boardwalk kind of on this southern end of the CWA. Miss Rose, to earlier you were asking, so it's right here, these two
That's
properties.
actually not within the CWA though.
Right on the edge. I believe the CWA is in front of their properties to some degree.
The design was a diagonal, I think. Actually doesn't touch the CWA, just FYI, I believe.
Design, correct.
I'm not sure how the determination of who owns the land in the UA.
Maybe I think
Right,
that's
so-
ready to be litigated, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be litigated sooner than later. So right now, staff was able to work with FDEP staff to get DEP staff to agree to, this is CWA, it's state lands, ownership, landward of the mean high, treat it like a state park. We would get 100% construction funding from FDEP, if that's the case. And that comes to about $7 million in change. So if the CWA happen to cease, if the CWA ceases to exist, these landowners would lose state funding theoretically in perpetuity, tune of $7 million every time they needed sand. Either have to rely on public access or paying for it privately, or the town paying for it, or some combination thereof. Decision coming up.
Yes.
And this just shows the borough area. I believe that these were some magnetic anomalies. I'm not sure what's happened to those, if the engineers have worked out, and I believe they put divers in the water, and been some more recent studies those magnetic anomalies, but this is the one that's closest corridor. I'm putting it to the closest spot on the beach. And there's the one that's going down south, great shot, to renourish that area.
Those are the pipe locations you're saying, right?
Yes, sir.
I guess it's easier to use the same borough area than it is in a place with a shorter pipeline run.
Right, yeah, I did research and ask about there's a borough area island shot. There is a borough area, I believe it's right here. It may tell it this resolution, but you can see kind of a clear cut where that Lee County used, I believe, for Lover's Key. I'd asked about that, but my understanding is there's not enough sand in that permitted area to fill the needs of. So Lee County is looking for some sand offshore, and with them years from now when we may need sand again, and our current borough area is going to be exhausted with. That's all I have. Questions, comments, complaints?
Great update. If everything goes as planned, when would the nourishment start?
See, I don't have the timeline on me. I believe we're submitting this month is the promise from our engineers, so Permitting takes about a year to a year and a half. I believe in the first or second quarter of 2023. Back to you. It really is going to depend on permitting and how quickly that gets out and availability of dredgers at the time when we go out to bid. Whether or not we want to do it during full season or hurricane season. And we are allowed to nourish during sea turtle season. It's permittable, so it's an option, but most beach managers who deal with renourishment, hurricane season, storms are the real concern, disrupting operations.
One thing during sea turtle season I understand is that you're not permitted to move nests going on. They can actually allow them to perish if they need to, and to be able to determine the results of but it's kind of a crazy thing, but.
Well, like if they put a nest and then you put another 100 feet of sand out there, and when the nest is laid and when they hatch.
Right, or yeah, like I said, or if it's too close to the edge of the water, I don't know if they allow you to actually add sand on it. I just don't think that's the case, but oddity.
They typically move the nest during a nourishment if we're sand in there.
I don't know. I'm telling you, I don't think you can, as I can recall from the last time. Odd, because they just have to, again, you have to just take the mortality to prevent from changing the mortality statistics from the event.
We have 11 months of people anyway, so.
Oh yeah, 11. Yeah, 11's a good number. Okay, thanks, Chad. It was great. I think that brought us up to speed. We get questions on it all the time. So if everybody's prepared, let's move it to exotic vegetation. And I'll turn the
You folks
floor over to
hopefully
Rose.
all got the steering document number 3.
You did. Great, thank you very much.
We're on, well, actually the visual record of Google Earth is still in progress. I talked to those people today. They're still working on it. It's not a priority, but they still are volunteering to do that. Notification to property owners. Last time we had discussed designing a link on the Fort Myers Beach Town website for property owners to access their information, and to finalize a draft of the disclaimer message. Not sure.
On those items, does it make sense actually to complete the vegetation ordinance before we notify them, or do you think that's important at all?
Probably, but, yeah, it'd be a good thing. Good point.
It would probably take that long anyway, but.
That's a good point. Then under public awareness, there's still that whole thing of adding vegetation information to the town of Fort Myers Beach. And then I had included putting in this handout from the University of Florida IFAS on vegetation. Originally it was like, oh, well, just create a PowerPoint, say plant this instead of that. But it's like there's so many invasive plants and there's already a lot of information out there, so it's like, why recreate the wheel that's already out there? So there's that information. Publicity, there have been vehicles in the local newspaper, which is the Beach Observer, for myself as well as Councilman Beach, and also back in July 7th, there was one on the 10th. From Jennifer, and there have been constant handouts and visual displays at the pop-up tent. One of our members, Jennifer Rusk, has discussed pop-up tent topics on the FBM radio talk show, and then she's also gone out and talked to various groups. And then include flyers. Well, so part of me is like, well, why don't we just put some of the flyers out there? are already created, possibly in the front lobby, where they show native landscaping, and they already have the plans, and they do all this wonderful stuff. I gave one to all of you. It's like, we don't need to recreate the wheel. There's all this wonderful stuff out available. It's like, hey, we could put this on our website, because that's one of the things listed on the solutions. And then B, could we just have some of these flyers and some other information out there on that little lobby area?
Like where they had the
Or-
shades brochure out there too. But do we have access to these? I mean,
Yes, I now have a box of like 100 of them in my trunk, because
okay,
I got tired of asking for them. So yes,
good. I think that's the problem, is it, Chad?
that's a possibility.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
So that is a concern, if we can do flyers in the lobby. And there's also some of the other flyers on, 2 other flyers, I think, on sort of wildflowers and butterflies or whatever. And then there's the vegetation plan, which is 18 suggestions. This is from a small, my little subcommittee, which consisted of one Master Gardener volunteer and one Estero Island Garden member. And we reviewed ordinances from Treasure Island, Sanibel, Bonita Springs, Naples, and Marco. And looked at some of those other previous things, and we came up with these 18 points. Although, if people agree to number 2, then that kind of eliminates number 12 and 13. So that's kind of a reduction. So then there would only be 16 suggestions. The top 3 on the first page are the ones that are probably what we consider the most important. And then the rest of them are not in any sequential order. But the first one was really to add in enforcement and penalty, because right now people do stuff, whatever stuff is, and they do not, they don't follow the current codes within Fort Myers Beach. It's just like, oh, sorry, didn't do it, no big deal. So there needs to be an enforcement and penalty. That's probably our number 1 concern. Second one was that a lot of towns, not just Fort Myers Beach, but a lot of them just list of what should be classified as invasive and removed, and then another list of what should be prohibited. And it's like, why would you do that? If it's going to be one, it should be both. And if you just included a list from the University of Florida's IFAS website of what is an invasive plant, because it could change. I mean, what's invasive today might also be added tomorrow as another invasive plant. And if you just put that in there as part of the ordinance, then it would be a constantly updated process versus creating duplicate list. And actually, most of the towns have duplicate lists. It's like, okay, we don't want this, and we need you to remove this, and then on the other hand, we don't want you to plant this. But it's like, well, that's just sort of redundant. It's just like, make it one list. You don't want this, and you don't want this. We want you to remove this if you're doing new construction, and we want you not to plant this. So if they decide to do number 2,
Maybe some of the weight comes down to, let's say you have a philera in your house, so as opposed to saying you can't plant another one, you have to remove one when it's there. You know what I mean?
I don't think we can do that now, right? To come through and tell them they have to remove those.
Yeah, it'd be under the new construction, which would probably be the
Right.
next thing down, number 3. Right now, it's like,
Actually, before we move along, I mean, what if we just took the category 1? I mean, I think there's 80 plants on there, the FLEPPC list. PIC, I don't know, is that, how do they pronounce that acronym? PIC?
Not sure.
Anyway, the question to Chad is, how would that be enforced if you actually had sort of a live list? You know, that the getting the LDO or whatever, or, again, I guess we have to talk about that too, but plan development order would have to then access that to see what they can't do as opposed to what's actually in the ordinance. Do you keep a live list, or do you start with something like category 1? Because I doubt they ever remove one, right? I mean, if they make it to the Cat 1 list, then that's a nasty.
It may be that you have to have it in your ordinance,
You can't,
relying on.
Right, and then you go every 5 years and you amend that list, which is pretty easy. I mean, you wouldn't have to change wording or anything.
Yeah, what I've seen is you reference the list as amended. So you can reference, category 1, invasive exotics as
Amended, and
As
then still
defined
they'll
by the
provide
FLE.
the 19, or the 2019 list that's current. And it's their responsibility to look to see if that's been amended. Is that what you're suggesting? Okay, I like that.
And as far as how it would be enforced, so in the past, I've seen it where a neighbor complains and then therefore the burden is put on has it. That's troublesome. Another mode of enforcement that may be a little bit less being neighbor versus neighbor would be to just require whenever there is a permitted activity or changes in the previous area.
Right.
Perhaps have your permit to put all these pavers out. By the way, you need to remove all the exotics.
Right.
That is how FDEP deals with it on the CCCL end whenever there's a permitted activity. There's always a clause, remove all exotic vegetation. Or if there's an enforcement action.
Right.
Taking out your dune. Okay.
Yeah, because we can't go back. I mean, we just can't. Everybody tomorrow.
Right.
You have to all those. And
No, this would be for new.
But I think, for everybody else's benefit, I think the suggestions that she provided us are based on actually adjustments to our current ordinances. So not to come up and just try to start fresh like we talked about last meeting.
Oh, no, these
That
are
we
just-
that we look at what we have. And what's not in here, not to say I didn't, to cut you short here, because I have no objections really to any of these. I've got some questions, but one of the issues also is right now, it only applies to multifamily and, commercial resident, or condos and commercial. So we would actually increase it to single family as well. That's not, I don't think that you guys addressed that here, did you? Or?
There is a comment down
Is
here
there?
somewhere. Well, actually,
Okay. Well, that goes, that almost goes without saying, I suppose, but I thought
there
I'd
is somewhere.
say, yeah. Single family homes for sure. Okay, go ahead.
Just so you know, town council is working on two different things, or two different ideas. One involves like some kind of minimal vegetation standards. I'm trying to discourage everything out and put down rock.
Yep.
The other is about preserving view corridors. So they're a conflict, and I'm not.
Yeah, I saw that actually. You guys have really talked about beach view and water view, which would appear to apply to only those that are, west of Estero Boulevard.
View corridors for riparian rights for beachfront properties or view corridors for traffic?
The question was, when people are driving down Stara Boulevard, they can look out and see the ocean.
Correct. It's all about the Gulf.
I think I don't think you necessarily make an ordinance that just applies to a subset of the population.
I don't know.
View corridor is impeded by the houses, isn't it?
That was another part of it, is to set the maximum amount of square footage under the house that you can close in, and that would be for every house.
Which currently does not exist, obviously, correct?
Currently, I don't think it exists.
I mean,
Not
clearly,
allowed to
on
use
any of
the
these
area?
new houses are boxes, and they have 8.5 feet or 10 feet on the side, and it's full of palms. So there's really not a view corridor there anyway, but I understand trying to,
And there's
Take
a
what
lot of
we have.
issues, because, you know, if you can see the beach from the road, then the beach can see the road, which means lighting issues, spring season, turtle season, that kind of stuff. So there's,
exists now though, obviously, yeah.
it does, but it would be,
I don't know, right? I mean, if you take down a cottage and you put down a huge block house, you know, big mansion, I'm pretty sure you're blocking a lot of the, I mean, picture Bonita Springs, right? Bonita Beach Road. It's a wall. Yeah. Absolute wall.
even with the restrictions as they are, the duplex alley, which is kind of between town and, you know, Baptist Church here, that's the oldest housing development, and they put up, there's duplexes, so I don't even think those limitations would affect those houses.
Yeah, I mean, that's a wall also.
That's something that we're grappling with the town council. I'm not sure how it's going to play out yet.
Right, and those are looking more at minimal requirements. Meaning for the gravel, landscaping.
The aspects are, you know, minimal vegetation, something to discourage rocks, people to put rocks. I don't think they're allowed to put down plastic now. Putting down the rocks, and then if they don't put down plastic, they spray it with Roundup all.
Yeah, I mean, but Council, Vice Chair Hotfrost had said, you know, the only way you could literally do that is to prevent them from enclosing the bottom of the house, I think, right? Because right now, if property has, you know, you can cut down anything that's it within beneficial use area, which is literally side lot to side lot, right? And so if you're putting up right now, if that's the way it exists right now, then the only possible view corridor you have is between the homes and the side lots.
There's also, you know, as far as vegetation goes, the part of this is that limitations on what you can put down for vegetation, because if you made all the houses be open underneath and a lot of people put up hedges to block the view, you really haven't provided any kind of.
Right. Right.
Should we put this on the next agenda and stay with
There's
exotic?
already in here, there's you know, there's in our existing ordinance, you have to put a hedge there to prevent lights from hitting the beach. I mean, that's what you're talking about. It's involved to some degree. Again, that is west of Estero Boulevard.
So I think, you know, most of the, like, if you were to say, you know, you couldn't put any vegetation and you had to have
You
most
use
of
the
your
triple
house.
CL as a that pretty much follows the Estero Boulevard. I mean, you could essentially use that as a delineation.
See, one thing we come with, you know, that you really come up with in it's like, there was the guy with the tuba, there was the downtown, there was the pirate who wants something. If you can't just write a rule for one person or a subset. I mean,
Thank you.
right? So it means, you know, if you were to raise your house, rules would apply and people could look at your pool. It's something we're talking about. I'm not sure where it's going to go.
Right.
Exotic vegetation.
He's trying to steer us
Right.
back here.
Well, that's what prompted this whole thing, right? Is this, you know, prevention of allowing planting of invasives while we're trying to clean them up. You know, that's what brought us in, and I think Rose has done a fantastic job on this so far, in that she's picked out those areas that actually need those, you know, those updates. And I don't know if we, as a group, need to go through each one, collectively agree that, yeah, those are good additions.
Well,
Or
I
do
would
we-
like to look at 3, because that's like the other, you know, the top 3 were the first 3, and then the rest of them were just kind of
Improvements.
improvement. The third one, though,
Modernizations, I like to call them.
is the landscaping standards when there's new construction. And then once again, should it be defined as exterior decks, pools, whatever,
I
that
didn't understand that, actually.
do or do not.
I did not understand that. That was,
Because if it's new construction, like you have an empty lot or you tore down a facility or building.
any kind of permit, you're saying?
Yes, then
Deal, I see.
should there be a whole new landscaping design that would be for irrigation?
Well, to Chad's
And-
point, that would be an opportunity to say that you know, if you're gonna do this, then what comes along with that is to land, you know, your,
Right, and then to
Get
go
rid of
back to
exotics,
number
maybe.
one, where you're back to, okay, if you don't do it, there's some,
right, punitive
Enforcement.
actions, yeah.
and then 4 and 5 is just, explanations, definitions, you know, it's like, as you go through our ordinances and other cities, it's like, just clarify and provide information. It's not like a tremendous deal.
Yeah, my question was, is that if this isn't referenced in any of the ordinance, does it make sense to put it in there?
Well, we could, but no other town has done that we reviewed, and
Right, it's just.
have other
makes
communities,
sense.
but
I mean,
it's
I'm
like,
not
if you
against
go
it,
through our ordinances, you will see these terms. As a matter of fact, we added some of them in because they weren't in there.
Going in there, okay.
Um,
So just definition.
It was just to
purposes.
clarify definitions, even though you would think some of them were common sense.
Right,
It's just kind of clarify what they are.
no objections to that.
On to 6. 6 is just kind of a friendly one. It's one of those things where it's people friendly, where you would add in something, clarify why you're doing it. We have it for the tree protection ordinance, but not for the general landscaping one.
Right.
7, this kind of needs to be adjusted, and we did not know even where to begin with that. It's like, it already says in our standards, there's a 50-foot buffer to be established between structures. Well, some of our lots don't allow for a 50-foot buffer, so it either needs to be a percent, or it needs to be, if your lot is X amount, then you can have a 50-foot buffer, and it's less than X amount, then you have to do a 20-foot or 30-foot buffer. That needs to be adjusted.
Right, that was one of my questions. Instead of using square footage, you need to use a percentage. Because any single family home there's no 50-foot buffer, period.
Oh, yeah, and that's really going, and that originally came from the 50-foot buffer from coastal construction. You know, but still, it's, you know, it's the lot size. We don't have
Lots are
huge
50
lots, so it's like
The lots are 50 feet wide or
That
60
needs
feet
to
wide. How could
be-
you have a 50-foot buffer? I mean,
adjusted. Number 8 was, we're still using the 78 coastal construction line. It uses 91, not sure. My example was, I took a class with coastal naturalist people, and there was some photos of the south end of the island, which we've talked about, that critical wildlife zone. It's like it didn't exist there 20 years ago. It wasn't even there 15 years ago. So it's like, why are we using something that seems to be outdated?
The 78 line is a zoning, to define a zoning district.
Right. It's like, maybe we possibly should consider updating that or looking at something else. Just a
what
consideration.
does that affect if we were to, I mean, is that something we could suggest? The benefit,
know.
is that
I'm not sure I understand the point of changing it. So the environmentally critical zone is basically defining the beach and dune area. It's the limit of where we would allow major structures.
isn't that the
houses.
91, isn't that what happened to this duplex?
1991 Coastal Construction Control Line is the state jurisdiction for CCCL cities.
But I'm just saying that whole
Different
section on the
definitions,
south
they're
end wasn't
different,
there
they're
in
just different
78.
Purposes.
Apples and oranges is different purposes.
No.